Welcome everyone to the Hawks Eye Podcast. I'm your host, Bryce Coutts, and today we are doing a Seahawks versus Rams preview, and I will be lucky enough to be joined by Blaine Grisak of the Turf Showtimes and the Rams Callsheet Podcast. Blaine does some excellent job covering the Rams and everything going on with that team, so it'll be great to get his insight going into this massive NFC clash this Sunday coming up. So we'll get Blaine in here shortly, but before we do that, just a reminder to everybody out there, don't forget, if you haven't already, and there's a lot of you that haven't, that enjoy this content, just sub up to it. Click that notification button, like the shows, comment on the shows, be interactive with this community that we built over here at the Hawks Eye. And yeah, it helps me out with the algorithm. And if you haven't already and you like the audio versions, head on over to Spotify. The show's over there. You can follow the show over there. Leave me a rating over there as it helps that algorithm too. So now we'll get into this really cool clash between the Seahawks and the Rams right after this.
Inside the 15, looks, throws, fires to the end zone, ball is caught, touchdown, Seahawks, dunking it over the bar is Jaxon, Smith-Njigba, he's on the run, Lynch, 40, pushes the man, 35, look at him go, he's down to 20, 15, he can go, he is gonna go, touchdown Seahawks, oh my word, a 67-yard run.
All right, everyone, welcome back in, and I am pleased to be joined by Blaine Grisak of the Turf Showtimes and the Rams Callsheet Podcast. Blaine, how are you doing, my friend?
Doing absolutely fantastic. Appreciate you having me on. Really looking forward to this one on Sunday. I think everybody is, and yeah, excited to get into it.
Yeah, no, this is potentially, obviously we're going to be talking Seahawks Rams here, as you do such a great job covering the LA Rams and that team. And I think the best place to start this show right now in a lot of ways, Blaine, is let's talk about, are the Seahawks and Rams really the kings of the NFC and the real kings of it? Because we saw last night Packers and Eagles played, who are two teams that, have kind of been fighting for that. And I think a lot of people were thinking that potentially the Packers, after they made the trade for Micah Parsons, were going to be the kings of the NFC with that addition. But it really looks like the Rams and Seahawks are the two top teams in the NFC and maybe even in the NFL in some respects.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree. I think, both these teams are 7-2. The Seahawks are absolutely steamrolling teams right now. And you can say the same about the Rams ever since they kind of lost to the 49ers. That was kind of the wake-up call for them. Both teams have won 4 straight. We saw the Eagles and Packers last night, and neither of those teams kind of look very impressive. The 49ers are very hurt. The Lions are kind of right there, and can't forget about them. But yeah, I think when it comes to the top teams in the NFC, the Rams and Seahawks are right there. And I think the biggest question is what Sam Darnold, how he performs kind of under this type of pressure against a good team like this.
Yeah, that'll be one of the things that we'll definitely talk about here shortly. But the first thing I wanted to ask you in this segment here, Blaine, is what's driving the Rams 7-2 start really? Is it Matt Stafford playing at that MVP level? Is it your defense, Jared Verse, Braden Fisk, and those guys in that area? What's driven you guys to this 7-2 start?
Yeah, I mean, you have to put Matthew Stafford right there. He's playing at just an unbelievable level. Arguably, probably, Drake May is right there, but I think Matthew Stafford is playing at an MVP caliber level right now. 25 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. Hasn't thrown interceptions over the last 6 games. Just making those crazy Matthew Stafford throws every week where whether it's a no looker or changing or hitting a throw with some crazy arm angle, just doing Matthew Stafford things, and he's being incredibly being incredibly efficient. He's figured it out with Davante Adams in the red zone over the last couple of weeks. So I think Matthew Stafford is definitely the driving force of it. But at the same time, I do think they are playing complementary football in a sense early on in the year. The defense had to pull out a really tight game against the Houston Texans. They won that game 14-9. The defense, I think, is overperforming. I expected them to kind of, be an above average unit, and for the first nine games, they've been arguably, statistically speaking, they are top 5. So, I think it's Stafford in the offense for sure. This is a Sean McVay team. It's the offense that kind of carries everything, but the defense is certainly doing its part.
Yeah, no, and that's the one thing is Matthew Stafford is playing absolutely unreal, and considering this offseason and training camp and all the concern around his back and was it going to be able to hold up and stuff, must be kind of a revelation for you guys there in LA that he is playing at this level at his age with that ongoing kind of injury concern that was lingering coming into the season.
Yeah, I don't think anybody really saw this coming. Like you said, the back injury was really one of the main talking points this offseason, and if he hurt his back, if he had an injured back and missed training camp every offseason and he played like this, I don't think anybody would mind. And he's 37 years old, playing like he's 27. And I know a lot of people kind of think, how many years does he have left? Is he going to be around for 2 years, 3 years? The Rams have 2 first-round picks. Will they draft a quarterback next year? And with the way Stafford is playing, all that stuff is kind of on the back burner right now.
So I'll ask you this from a Rams perspective, and I know you definitely follow the Seahawks and the other NFC West teams. For you, what have you noticed that's different about Mike Macdonald's Seahawks this year compared to the team that you saw last year? Do you think there's something more going on with Mike Macdonald, what he's been able to do?
I think they're just a lot more well organized, I guess. I think last year, I think there was certainly an adjustment for him from just learning how to go from just being a coordinator to being a head coach, and kind of saw some early season bumps last year. And I do think they kind of hit their stride over the second half of the season. And then just as with any Mike Macdonald unit, you go back to his time in Baltimore. That first year on defense, it took that Ravens team in 2022 to really. To really find their stride on defense and figure things out. And then they were the best defense in the league in 2023. And that the same thing has happened in Seattle. They kind of took last year, had to figure things out, but you could see the potential. And this year they are, I don't want to make comparisons to the Legion of Boom or anything, but they are certainly looking like a very strong unit for sure.
It's funny, that conversation, because a lot of us here in Seattle, this is the first time we've had a defense since the LOB that has kind of been this dominant in a lot of ways. And it's interesting to me because I see components of 2 defenses in this group. One, I look at the LOB factor in the sense of how these guys play for one another, like that brotherhood the LOB had with Chancellor and Earl and Sherm, and just that group was so connected. But on the flip side of it, this defense is so fast. Like they fly around, and that's something I wouldn't say the LOB wasn't, but they were never this fast, in my opinion. This reminds me a little bit of like the 2015 Denver Broncos team, that no-fly zone defense that just flew around the ball and just created havoc everywhere. They just move faster than everybody else. So it's almost like this kind of merger of 2 defenses from that era together in different components that I think makes it a really special unit, because to not have an elite level pass rusher but create the amount of pressure Seattle's been able to do in the first couple of weeks, first half of this season and more, is pretty special. So I'll ask you this segment here, Blaine. How would you describe the current vibe in this rivalry between the Rams and the Seahawks?
I just kind of wrote about this today, and that's just like I think the Rams 49ers are kind of seen as like the primary rivalry of the NFC West, at least from a Rams perspective. I'm not sure what it is from the Seahawks side, but if you were to ask most Rams fans, I think they'd say the 49ers are our main rival. But you look at at least ever since I was growing up, the Seahawks have always been just a giant pain in my side. You go back to 2010, and they're playing Week 17 for the NFC West crown. You go back just the last couple of years. You'll see us go 12-4 in 2020, and you have Jared Goff with an injured thumb. They go into Seattle and win that playoff game. Last year, the Rams won the NFC West on some crazy ass tiebreaker, and that's why they win the NFC West. And then this year, these two teams are meeting up at 7-2. So as much as I think Rams fans see San Francisco in a different light, I think just from a geographical perspective and just how many 49ers fans kind of live in the SoCal area. The Rams and Seahawks, in my opinion, probably played the more important games against each other over the last decade or so.
Yeah, it's really interesting because, like, from a Seahawk perspective, it kind of flops between the Rams and the 49ers. I feel, at least for me, it does. And the reason I say that is we had the, Holmgren era where you guys had Mike Martz and you were in St. Louis, and the Rams were kind of the team we needed to get over the hump to kind of get into that Hasselback into the Super Bowl and into the playoffs and stuff. And we had some great rivalry games then, like the 2004 NFC wildcard game in Seattle that year. Came down to basically a shovel from Hasselback to Bobby Ingram that wasn't caught in the end zone that ended that game. But there's things in it where I look at it and I go, it kind of wavers for us. Like, there's moments where the 49ers definitely are like our main rivalry. And usually that was during the Jeff Fisher era for you guys, where you were a 500 football team and you were kind of, exactly to your point, you were like the pest in our side. It was like we were so focused on the 49ers and Jim Harbaugh and that group that we kind of let the games with you guys be maybe closer than we should have, and they were definitely more challenging than I think some people thought. But then that table's turned. Like, the 49ers rivalry is there, but it hasn't, and the Rams have really crept up. And for me, and I know the 49ers are still in the division race right now, and I foresee them maybe getting a wild card spot, but I don't look at them as this year at least, a true competitor for that spot because of the fact of all the injuries they've dealt with. This year to me feels very much like 2012 NFC West, where you guys are playing the role of the 49ers for us, where if we want to actually be considered a team that's in that top echelon, like we're talking about, top of the NFC, in that conversation, we have to kind of exercise that demon, which is the LA Rams. And in that year, Seattle's first game versus the Niners, they struggled. They lost that game. It was a tough game, but they lost 13-6. And then they were able to kind of get over the hump a little bit. And even in the following year when we won our Super Bowl, it still was a challenge. We still split the season series. And that's why it's going to be really fascinating to see. So, like, I would say right now, in my opinion, the Rams are more of the obstacle to become legitimate, and the 49ers are kind of turning into the pest in our side. Like, our game with them week one, I think in a lot of ways, we outplayed them. We got down to the, Nick Bosa, elite level play caused that loss in that game, and some questionable play calling by Clint Kubiak. But no, I think to your point that lately the games that have had the more impactfulness for Seattle have definitely been against the LA Rams, and it'll make things interesting. So let's kind of pivot here, Blaine, and I want to kind of get your thoughts on what are some of the key battles you're looking for in this game that you think will decide everything.
I think it starts in the trenches for me. I think these are I think we've talked about, these are two of probably the better pass rushes in the NFL, and I'm not the Rams offensive line has come a long way since week one. I think at the first 6 weeks or so, they were shuffling a lot of things around. Had a different right tackle, left guard, and they finally kind of solidified things. They have Steve Avila back at left guard instead of Justin Dedich. Rob Havenstein, whether I agree with it or not, is back at right tackle over Warren McClendon. But I still think that the Rams offensive line is kind of their weak spot, I guess. And if the Seahawks edge rushers, I think, can take advantage of the Rams tackles, get to Matthew Stafford. He has been very good under pressure. He's, I think, one of the better pocket movers as far as quarterbacks go in the NFL. But he's not mobile by any means either. You can certainly get get to him and create some negative plays. So I think that's certainly going to be key for Seattle. But I think that goes for the Rams as well. They really learned what pressure can do to Sam Darnold last year when they played the Vikings, and you can force him into some mistakes. But at the same time, I think the Seahawks offensive line is really exceeding expectations this year. Gray Zabel is playing absolutely fantastic on the interior. They're very stable at the tackles, and that's a big reason why Sam Darnold is playing as well as he is right now. But yeah, I think both sides. We've talked about it. These two quarterbacks are playing at an elite level right now, so you have to do something to disrupt that. And if you can do that, I think you can force either quarterback into some mistakes.
Yeah, and I agree completely with you. As that being one of my key matchups as well, is how do these O lines versus these D lines and these front sevens, and especially for you guys, like how does your offensive line and that handle the disguised blitz packages that Mike Macdonald likes to do, and he's been bringing a lot of, as we saw, the Cardinals last week struggled picking that up, and it cost Jacoby Brissett 2 strip sacks for DeMarcus Lawrence touchdown. So that'll be something that'll be interesting to see. The other matchup for me that I'm really interested in here, Blaine, I kind of want to get your thoughts on it, is your Rams secondary versus Seattle receiving corps, especially JSN. And, when I look at your guys' defense, like that front seven is kind of where I guess most of the attention is given because it's such a good unit for you guys. The secondary is kind of this forgotten about piece, I think, but how do you view your Rams secondary holding up against the JSN? Obviously, the Cooper Kupp homecoming. We just acquired Rashid Shaheed. How do you view that holding up against this aerial attack from Seattle?
Yeah, I mean, JSN's going to get his. I think that's just something that everybody has to accept. He's probably the best wide receiver in the NFL this season, or if not the best, right there with guys like Jamar Chase. And I think you could probably throw Puka Nacua in there as well. But he's having an absolutely fantastic season, and my fantasy team is benefiting because of it. And so. But he's gonna get his, and that's something you just kind of have to accept. I think in that first meeting last year between these two teams, I think he had like 7 receptions for 180 yards or whatnot. But the Rams were still able to win that game because they were able to mitigate the damage elsewhere. And I also think it's kind of important to remember that the Rams aren't going to just man up and put Emmanuel Forbes or Darius Williams or Kobe Durant on JSN. They do play a lot of zone. Krishula just kind of he takes a lot of pressure off of the quarterbacks with the type of safety looks. What type of safety looks that they use? The Rams play a lot of dimes. So you can see a lot of probably 3 and 4 safety looks. Quentin Lake is playing at an absolute elite level. They're in the slot. Emmanuel Forbes is starting to kind of play better over the last three weeks or so, but I think he's still someone that can kind of be exploited. But yeah, when you look at that matchup, I think it's an obvious advantage to the Seahawks. But I think just from a schematic perspective, there are things that Krishula can do to. I mean, this is still a secondary that's playing at a top five level. If is like we talked about, the pass rush has to get there. You look at the Eagles game the Rams played earlier this season. In that first half, they get to Jalen Hurts. They're creating havoc and getting the Eagles off the field. In the second half, the pass rush doesn't get to Hurts. He's finding AJ Brown and Davante Smith down the field, and that game takes a turn. So it is key for the Rams pass rush to get to Darnold. And I think that Krishula he does scheme things up and use the safeties to take pressure off the corners. But like I said, I think JSN could still have a pretty big game here.
The third matchup, I think, or the third kind of key to this game, or how you want to do it, is I think are these two running attacks versus these two defenses, and who can at least establish some sort of running game to slow down these pass rushes, whether it be, the Seahawks trying to slow down Jared Verse and Brandon Fisk and Byron Young there, or if it's, in the same thing, Seattle trying to contain Williams and Corum for you guys. Because I think the biggest passing advantage both these teams have, and I think it comes from obviously the offensive styles now almost mimic each other in a lot of ways with what Clint Kubiak's doing, which seems to be a marriage between some of the McVay stuff because of Jake Peets, I think, being here in Seattle and what he knows of McVay's system. And obviously what Kubiak's learned through his years, through his dad and Mike Shanahan and Kyle Shanahan. You're going to see a lot of play action. and both these teams thrive off of the play action game. I think the running games are going to be key to see if one of these two teams, whoever establishes it better, can actually make explosive plays down the field. Would you agree?
I would agree with that, and honestly, if it does come down to the run games, I think the Rams have a major advantage in that area. I think running the ball is something that the Seahawks have really kind of struggled to do consistently. I know they rushed for over 200 yards last week, but there were 8 games before that in which they really struggled to run the ball. The Rams have been one of the better run defenses this season. They signed Puka Nacua in the offseason. He's been just a key member of that defensive line and clogging up the middle. Nate Landman is having an absolutely incredible year at linebacker and doing a great job just kind of meeting the running back in the gap. They shut down Saquon Barkley. They've shut down CMC twice. I think CMC had 13 carries for 25 yards or something like that last week. So this Rams defense has stopped the run a lot better than they have last season. And then just when it comes to the Rams running game, Kyron Williams, he may not be the most explosive running back, but he is that guy that he's gonna step up to the plate and hit single after single after single and get 4 yards to keep the offense on track, which is what you need in this type of game.
Completely agree. And that's the thing for Seattle. Obviously, yes, we did run for 200 yards, and we'll talk about it a little bit in a segment here. We'll get on to this trench warfare because I think it's really the big highlight matchup in this game. But Seattle obviously lost our starting setter, Jalen Sundell. But for me, like, Jalen's played well and he's played good. He hasn't been awful. He's played good. Zabel's definitely been our best interior offensive lineman, and Anthony Bradford's still Anthony Bradford. He has his ups and his downs, and that's for sure. And he probably played his best game last week against the Cardinals. But when we inserted Olu Oluwatimi back in at center, the Michigan center we drafted a few years ago, it was like a catalyst for our run game because we ran for 125 yards once he got into the game. It'll be interesting to see him with a full week if our run attack can't kind of at least be more impactful now. So that'll be something to look at. But Blaine, the other matchup, and I think this deserves its own segment because I think it's going to be a fascinating one to watch. It's this coaching chess match, and I think it's going to be one for the ages with Mike Macdonald and Sean McVay going at it because obviously Sean really got Mike's, I would say got into Mike's bag when Mike was in Baltimore there and created a lot of problems for him that one game where, it came down to the last kind of wire there for that win. But I'd say even last year, the game up in Seattle that you guys won because of some Geno Smith turnovers that really shot us in the foot in the red zone, Mike seemed to have Sean's, number in that game. The last game of the year last year, I know there's some people that want to talk about, the yardage that was put up by Jimmy Garoppolo in a game that basically meant nothing really for both teams because at that point you guys had the tiebreaker and going to win the division. The first two games I mentioned, though, to me are really fascinating ones to study. What do you make of this coaching matchup between McVay and Macdonald?
Yeah, I think when you talk about, I think, coaching matchups, you talk about, Shanahan, Vic Fangio, it pops up immediately. But I think this McVay Macdonald coaching matchup from an offensive and defensive perspective is right there. I think you look back at 2023 and Macdonald was seen as kind of this McVay Shanahan just kryptonite, and the Rams scored 31 points. They scored 31 points in that game and end up losing in overtime. And then last year, I think Rams had the most three and outs in an offensive game during the McVay era. So like you said, Macdonald kind of had his number there. But the Rams offense is so different this year, and the Macdonald defense has certainly gotten better in year two with Seattle. But the Rams are running so much more 13 personnel, especially over the last month. I think they were running 13 personnel, 3 tight end sets at like a 43.9% rate, and just absolutely doing wonders with it. When you have an offense with Puka Nacua, Davante Adams, Kyron Williams, you expect those three to kind of be the feature pieces, and they are. But these tight ends have really stepped up over the last month or so and become a featured piece of the offense. Terrence Ferguson is starting to come on. Davis Allen has become a very key role player. Colby Parkinson, who Seattle fans are probably pretty familiar with, is finding his role in the offense. So I'm really interested to see kind of the chess match here and how Macdonald matches McVay when the Rams do go to 13 personnel. Do they match them in nickel and force the Rams to get something going on the ground? Because I do think Seattle has a defensive front that can cause issues in the run game. Or the reason why the Rams are getting into 13 personnel so often is so defenses match them in base, and you're able to get those matchups with Terrence Ferguson on a linebacker or whatnot. So I'm very interested to see kind of how that plays out.
I think the interesting player in that matchup, to your point, when you guys do go into 13 personnel, because Drake Thomas has stepped in as our weak side linebacker. Hopefully we have an ex-Ram back this week that we absolutely love having in Seattle, and Ernest Jones, who is a great cover linebacker in a lot of ways, and so is Drake Thomas. And that's something we've seen in matchups we've had with Trey McBride and Zach Ertz and things like that, where these guys can match up. I think the one thing that we didn't have last year, and I think makes a massive difference this year for Seattle, is Nick Eamon-Warry. That is one of the few guys, and I know, people are going to talk about what Trey McBride did last weekend, and he went 9 for 127 and a touchdown. But you're also playing in a situation where the game was 35 or 38-7 at halftime. Seattle moved a bunch of backups in, and they played a bunch of very vanilla-based stuff, and you're able to dink and dunk your way down the field. Up until that point, Nick Eamon-Warry had done a fantastic job of limiting the, explosive plays of Trey McBride. And I think he is going to be the key point of how much base you see Seattle play. Is it, do they bring Tyrese Knight into the game? I don't know. He's played well, but it's kind of the thing of, do you go into a 4-2-5 nickel look and end up with, Nick Eamon-Warry playing some linebacker and covering some of those, 3-set tight end looks? So it'll be a really fascinating chess match to see, because we are still missing Julian Love here in Seattle, which is a big loss for us on the back end. Even though Ty Okada has stepped in and played really good football, Julian Love is a Pro Bowl, almost all pro level safety. So it'll make things interesting to see what Seattle does. So one of the things I wanted to ask you about, from your perspective, Blaine, and watching some of what Macdonald's done, what have you noticed that Mike has evolved from when he was in Baltimore to what he does now in Seattle? Is there something that stands out particularly to you that you see more of?
I think you kind of touched on it earlier, and it's creating these different pressure looks. I mean, there were the pressure looks in Baltimore. You look at the Seattle Passers, and they certainly have guys. You have Byron Murphy, who are coming out of Texas. Leonard Williams is certainly there. DeMarcus Lawrence had a big week, had a big game last week, and is important defensive line. But you look at the edge rushers, and they don't have the Seahawks don't have a Jared Verse or Nick Bosa, and they're still able to create all this pressure and create havoc for offenses, and then that's something that I think has really impressed me with what he's done with this group.
Yeah, he's definitely started to blitz more and more since he's gotten Nick Eamon-Warry into the lineup, because we obviously missed him the first 4 games, and that's the one thing I think Seattle fans as a whole are kind of waiting for down this back end stretch here. Is what does this defense look like when it's fully healthy? Because it hasn't been, except for 4 plays in game 1 of the season. We lost Nick Eamon-Warry for a bunch of weeks. We lost Devin Witherspoon. We've lost Ernest Jones. We've lost Julian Love. Now we've lost Jaron Reed, which I think is an under the radar loss for us, for some teams when they look at us. He is so impactful for our run game, especially, and our run defense. So that'll be, an interesting kind of, way maybe Sean McVay does attack that a little bit more. So I'll ask you this, Blaine. In your opinion, who holds the edge, the experience or the adaptability between these 2 coaches?
Oh man, that's tough. I think for a game like this, I think I'll lean towards experience. I think when we get to the second game between these 2 teams in a few weeks, I think that adaptability and having just kind of seen the other team before will take the edge. But in a game like this, big NFC West matchup, 7-2 against 7-2. McVay's been here before, where I think this is kind of the first kind of really big matchup for Mike Macdonald, and so I think in that sense, McVay I think has the edge.
Yeah, and you know what? I would probably have to agree with you in that sense, because yes, Mike has played in some of these or coached in some of these big games, but as a defensive coordinator, a little bit different of a job as a head coach to be in those roles, and just some of the things that are thrown on your plate now more as a head coach and defensive coordinator. So that'll be an interesting thing. But let's kind of get into this trench warfare. We talked about it a little bit in the matchup segment there, Blaine. But the thing I got to ask you is, how do you view the Rams are going to be able to handle this front of Seattle? You talked about the tackles kind of being the weak spot and whether or not Seattle's edges, DeMarcus Lawrence, Derek Hall, Uchenna Nwosu, who's had a revival since he's come back from injury this year. Like, how do you view your offensive line, and what do you think McVay is going to do to try and help this offensive line handle this front four, front five, however you want to call it, in Seattle?
Yeah, I really worry about the stunts and the Rams being able to pick those up. To pick those up, just watching film every week, especially on the left side. Alaric Jackson, Steve Avila aren't always necessarily on the same page when it comes to who has who. But as far as what McVay will do to help that. The Rams really use their tight ends a lot in pass protection. Like as much as the tight ends have become a featured piece in the passing game over the past few weeks, all season. They have they've played a role in the in pass pro, whether it's Colby Parkinson kind of staying back in pass pro and helping Rob Havenstein on the right side and providing the chip. Same thing on the left side. Leaving the tight end there to help Alaric Jackson a little bit. I think you can probably expect that, but at some point, if you're leaving a tight end back in pass pro, that takes away a potential pass catcher in the back end and kind of limits your options there. So certainly I think something to keep an eye on there.
I think the interesting thing in this matchup, and I want to get your thoughts on it, is I think whoever holds early down tempo or converts the most on their first and second downs and getting, ahead of the sticks and stuff and being in positive situations, I think that's going to be the leverage key in this game to handling each team's defensive front, because it'll limit what they can really do and how much pressure. The more, I think the team that gets stuck in the most third and long situations may be the team that struggles the most offensively. Would you tend to agree with that?
I would, especially from I guess the Rams side. I mean, you look at what they want to do on defense, and that is kind of allow the pass rushers to pin their ears back. But they also, I touched on a little bit earlier, Chris Shula loves playing these dime looks, and you can't really play dime on second and on second and 3 or second and 2, and whatnot. So if you want to get into those lighter looks, you have to keep teams in second and 8, second and 7, if Darnold and the Seattle offense can kind of win on early downs, I think that's certainly an advantage for them.
So the other thing I wanted to ask you is, Sean McVay, obviously when he came into the NFL and especially when he got to the Rams, really was early on a zone run team, wide zone to be more specific, with Todd Gurley in that group. But over the last few years, it's changed. So, how do you view his run scheme versus the Seattle front seven, because they've kind of pivoted, right, to more of a gap zone scheme mix kind of a thing now, like hybrid?
Yeah. So like you said, in 2017, 2018, they were this pure wide zone, typical, Shanahan style run team, which made sense with McVay's background. And then in 2023, I think it was, they just kind of they absolutely couldn't run the ball in 2021 and 2022, so they just completely scrapped it. Got to be more of a downhill run team with gap power and just running a ton of duo. And I just checked these numbers these numbers earlier today, and they have exactly 108 gap power rushing attempts and 108 zone attempts this season. They are exactly 50-50. So they like to mix it up, and they have Kyron Williams and Blake Corum, and Kyron's kind of better at that man gap stuff inside, whereas you get Blake Corum. Corum wants to be running along the offensive line and kind of look for that cutback lane, and he's had a lot of success with it. I think since week 7, Corum's explosive run rate and on wide zone looks is 25%, which is just unbelievable. So they do really complement each other well. But yeah, this run game has certainly evolved, and I'm sure McVay will look to attack the Seattle edges a little bit. But yeah, the strength that I think of the Seahawks defensive line is that interior, and I'm not sure you want to be running at those guys very often.
Yeah, and especially with how Seattle likes to play, in Mike's defense, they're a little bit 4-2-5 kind of look, especially when they have that nickel, Nikim and Warion. Trying to get lateral might be your best bet because, to your point, Byron Murphy has such a good drop knee technique inside, Leonard Williams. But this is where I talk about that Jaron Reed injury could play such a huge factor in that because he is such a good interior run defender. It could make things interesting. So the last question I'll ask you on this, Blaine, is who, in your opinion, wins the fourth quarter line battle? Like, if you had to put money down right now, which defensive or offensive line are you banking more on in the fourth quarter when you need it most?
I think I have to take the Rams in that one. I think if Jared Verse, Kobe Turner, Braden Fisk need a moment, need a sack, I think you can trust those guys to do it. Not that the Seahawks aren't capable, but just when Jared Verse is a special type of player, and if you need a play, he's a guy that I think you can trust more often than not to make it.
So it's really interesting because for me, I'm going to fall on the other side of this. And actually, you swayed my opinion, Blaine, in a lot of ways. When you talked about how much your tackles are struggling in LA right now, and it's your kind of area of concern for you, because I was going to go defensive line, I was going to take Seattle, and offensive line, I was going to take the Rams. But the way you talked about it kind of actually swung my opinion a little bit. And I'm going to kind of rest on the other side and go, I think Seattle's ability to have such a rotation up front allows them to be fresh in that fourth quarter and to be able to get that potential play, especially with Mike Macdonald's, sub blitz packages and sim pressures and so on. And offensively, Seattle's only given up 10 sacks, I think, this entire season so far. And Sam Darnold does such a good job getting the ball out that it tends to lead me to go to that way. If you had given me more on the tackles and made me believe in your tackles a little bit more, I would have probably sided with you and the Rams on the offensive line there. So that's definitely going to be an interesting battle there. But, let's talk about this before we get into the 2-minute drill here. This game really could reshape the entire NFC playoff race in a lot of ways. Because, again, like we talked about at the top of the show, are the Seahawks and the Rams the real kings of the NFC? If you look at it this way, like both are 7-2. The winner of this game right now, the percentages, whoever wins this game has a 65% chance to win the division, which isn't something to slouch at. It's not like, it's, 50-50 still or whatever. Like that's a significant jump to winning this division. And you're talking about two quarterbacks right now that are playing probably at, some of the highest levels in the NFL, and Sam Darnold and Matthew Stafford. They have single digits in the interception range. And to your point, in the last 6 games, Stafford hasn't thrown an interception. They both have double digits in the touchdowns, Matthew with 25, Sam with 23, and they both thrown for over 2,200 yards already, and we're halfway through the season. So, what I'll ask you this first off, which team do you think gains more from this win? Because, again, it's still early. They do have another matchup in a few weeks, like you alluded to. Who gains more from this win, in your opinion, Blaine?
That's a tough one because I think the answers are very different either way. I think for the Rams, I think it's important. If they win this game, it's important in the sense that after Sunday, the Rams have the Tampa Bay the following week, and then they have Carolina and Arizona. But then they still have to play. They still have to play Detroit. Still have to play Seattle again. Their schedule just isn't. It's very difficult here in the second half of the season. So getting that win here, taking early control to kind of give yourself some breathing room over the next 5-6 weeks, I think would be very, very important. But at the same time, I think you kind of touched on it a little bit earlier, where for Seattle to, I think, kind of realize their full potential, they need a very big win, a very big win like this. And so I think if Seattle wins on Sunday, it could catapult them to not just win the NFC West, but win the NFC, honestly.
Yeah, and that's kind of how I feel about it. Because like you said, your guys' stretch does get rather difficult leading into that next matchup with us, which I have that December 18th Thursday night football one circled just as much as I had this one circled at the beginning, because I think that one will decide the second half of this season in some respects for both teams. Because for Seattle, after this, we have the Titans, we have the Vikings, who kind of are this Jekyll and Hyde team. We have the Falcons, and then we have the Colts, who knows at this point what version of Danny Dimes you're going to get with that Colts team. And then we play you guys, Thursday night, at home. So it's going to be really interesting, but I do agree with you in the sense of, and like I said, like this will legitimize Seattle. This will then make Seattle, in my opinion, some people have already, national media, we all hear it. Oh, the Seahawks are Super Bowl contenders. They're one of the top teams. And I agree they're one of the top teams. They need to win a game like this for me to really cement these guys are a Super Bowl contender, because this is a Super Bowl caliber team you're about to play. A team that last year went to the NFC Championship game against the Eagles, gave an Eagles a tougher game than the Chiefs did in the Super Bowl. And this is a situation where this is your monkey you need to get off your back, as famously Steve Young said after that 1994 Super Bowl. That's what you guys are right now. You guys are the one thing for us, I think, that are truly holding us back. We were able to beat the 49ers last year in Santa Clara, and I think that was that moment for us with that team. We had a little bit of a hiccup this year, but I don't think round 2 with them will be nearly the same sort of outcome. You guys truly are that obstacle standing in Seattle's way right now of being, one of the top teams. Now, I'll ask you this, and it'll be really interesting to get your perspective because of how well Matthew Stafford has played. Would this win catapult Matthew Stafford into the leader of the MVP race?
I think so, for sure. Yeah. I mean, you look, I think over the first, I think probably 7 games of the year, the Rams didn't have that big win, that big win on their schedule. They lost at the last second to the Eagles. They lost a game that they really should have won against the 49ers. But you saw his odds go from like 4th to really right there with Drake May just after beating the 49ers last week. So you play well and beat a team like Seattle in a game that it's as close to prime time as you're going to get. You're going to be Fox's game of the week. You're going to be the game that everybody is watching on Sunday afternoon. So if you show up in that moment, lift your team over your highest level your biggest rival at this moment. I do think he solidifies himself as the MVP leader with the win.
So the other thing I'm going to ask you about this is, would a win for Seattle truly basically be the first statement win for Mike Macdonald in his era, in your opinion, as the Seahawks head coach?
I think so, for sure. Yeah, definitely. The Seahawks, I think, were that kind of scrappy team last year that just kind of missed out on the playoffs, and here they are now, 7-2. Show everybody what you're made of, and what you can do, and like you said, what a better opportunity than against a team that really gave an Eagles for a run for their money last year, a team that is 4 years now removed from the Super Bowl, is currently seen as a Super Bowl contender. I think it would be the biggest win of the Macdonald era, for sure.
All right, last question in this segment before we get to our 2-minute drill here, Blaine, is who for you is the under the radar X factor in this game? What player for you?
I will take. There's 2 guys I'm contemplating here. I think I'll take Cam Kinchins on the back end at safety. He got the best of Geno Smith twice last year in the red zone. He's kind of been close to an interception a few times this year, but I think in a game like this, creating a big time turnover would be a huge difference, and he's certainly, I think, a playmaker on the back end of that Rams defense.
So for me, it's going to be Olu Oluwatimi for Seattle, as we are going to have a new center in, a guy that, has played the back half of last year for Seattle and has done quite well and was a catalyst for our run game kind of really getting some traction last week. I think for him, it's going to be an under the radar. If he has a good game, I think it could really push this run game forward. But Blaine, this is the one segment I love to do with all my guests. It's the 2-minute drill. You get 10 rapid fire questions. You get 1 timeout, which allows you to skip a question to then come back to it at a later moment. And just give me the first kind of answers that pop into your head when it comes to it. So we'll get into the 2-minute drill right after this.
Go!
All right, question 1, Blaine. Who is the better quarterback right now, Matthew Stafford or Sam Darnold?
Matthew Stafford.
Okay. Question 2, which receiver duo would you take for one game, JSN and Cooper Kupp or Adams and Puka?
Adams and Puka.
Okay. Question 3, tougher to scheme against, Mike Macdonald's defense or Sean McVay's offense?
Sean McVay's offense.
Okay. Question 4, more likely to have a defensive TD on Sunday, the Seahawks or the Rams?
Seahawks.
Okay. Who gets the first sack of the game, Rams or Seahawks?
Seahawks.
Okay. Question 6, over under 100 yards for JSN?
Over.
Okay. Question 7, more impactful, K9 or Puka Nacua?
Puka.
Okay. Question 8, which coach will deliver the gutsiest fourth down call?
Sean McVay, only because he has no option as a field goal kicker right now.
Okay. Question 9, which team will win time of possession?
The Rams.
Okay. And question 10, final gut feeling, who walks out with the NFC West lead?
The Rams.
Okay. All right. And that was the fastest, I think, 2-minute drill we have done this year. So, all right, Blaine, the last part here is the final word. And in this case, who's going to own the NFC West? So I will give you the score prediction. What do you think the score is going to be? And why do you feel so confident the Rams are going to be the team to walk out with the win on Sunday?
Yeah, I think this is actually going to be a high-scoring game. I think the over/under when I looked yesterday, I think it was like 48.5, and I think this easily goes over. I think I'm going to take the Rams. I think I'll go 34-30 here in this one, and we've kind of already touched on this, but the Rams are just they've been in this spot before. They're playing really good football right now. They're playing they're kind of peaking, I think, at the right moment here. They're at home. I do think these two teams end up splitting the season series. I do think Seattle will have the upper hand in the second meeting in Seattle. But for this game, I think the Rams are really focused right now, playing really well, and I would expect them to come out on top.
So I'm kind of the opposite in this one, Blaine. I got a feeling this might be a low scoring game, and I've been saying for the past couple weeks now that this to me is very reminiscent for me with the Rams of Seattle San Fran 2012. And I think there is a chance Seattle loses this game. People on my channel are going to hate me for saying this, but I'm going to be realistic. I think it's going to be 24-20 Rams. I think it'll be lower scoring because I think both of these defenses are going to give each team's offense some struggles. And I think it's going to, again, we saw it last year in the one meaningful matchup between these two. Like, both offenses struggled to really gain any traction in that game up in Seattle. And I think it'll come down. The thing that I think it'll be is I think it'll be a late drive by Matthew Stafford where he makes a big throw at a big time to either Puka or, Adams that will put them into field goal range to kick a game-winning field goal, even though you guys don't really have a field goal kicker. I just think that's a potential way this goes. But that's my prediction for this. I think, my 3 keys, obviously, I will give those in my live preview show later this week. But I think this is going to be a split. I think the game in Seattle, I think to your point earlier when I asked you about what's more important in this game, experience or adaptability, I think when it comes to the adaptability point for a defense in a second matchup, it's a lot easier because an offense is going to still want to go to a lot of the things they're comfortable with if they win that game. As an offense coordinator myself, it's just a way of life. You still have your calls that you thought, hey, this worked on this defense last time. We're still going to go to that. And that's where I think, to your point, the adaptability factor is going to be the key in the second matchup coming on December 18th, that Thursday night game. So I think it's going to be a great game. I'm really looking forward to it. It's finally the first game, I think, this year for me as a Seahawks fan that I'm just like, I can't wait to sit down and watch this chess match that goes on between these two teams because I think it's going to be one that we're going to see for a few years here with McVay and Macdonald in the same division.
Yeah, no, I feel the same. I'm really excited for this one. The Rams have played a few big games this year. The Thursday night game against San Francisco last week in San Francisco, but this game could really kind of catapult them. It could catapult either team kind of for the second half of the season and really solidify either team as a legitimate Super Bowl contender. And these are the games we suit up for on Sundays to watch. So.
All right, Blaine. Well, I want to thank you, man, for coming on the show. It's always great to have you on here to talk ball and to talk Rams Seahawks. So why don't you let my viewers and listeners know where they can find more of your stuff, because I know you do such a great job with the content that you kick out. So let them know where to find more of your stuff, man.
No, yeah, we really appreciate you having me on. I can find all my stuff over on turfshowtimes.com. All my written content is there. Have a YouTube channel, the Rams Callsheet with Blaine Grisak, and then over on Twitter at @bgrisaktst.
All right, guys, and I'll make sure those links are tapped in below, and I strongly suggest you guys go over there and check out what Blaine does. It's fantastic work, and even though it's coming from a Rams perspective, it's great insight into what's going on with that team, and I always like to know what's going on with our divisional opponents, because we always see them every year, and they're always a thorn in our side. So thanks again, Blaine, for your time, and look forward to having you back maybe in a couple weeks here for that tee-up of that December 18th game.
Sounds good.
All right, guys, that was guest Blaine Grisak of the turfshowtimes.com and the Rams Callsheet Podcast. Blaine does a fantastic job covering the Rams, guys. He is one of my favorite content creators, lucky enough to make a connection through field goals and Mookie Alexander helping set that connection up for me with Blaine. And it's been a fantastic one and one that I really enjoy. And that discussion was, I thought, really insightful on the Rams perspective of, how Blaine's looking at this matchup and some of the things. And there's always going to be a level of homerism and with content creators, just because they, really are passionate about their teams. And I thought, one thing Blaine does well, he's very objective in that in some regards and can give you the insight that you want when you're looking at a divisional opponent. So guys, with that being said, some upcoming content that's going to be dropping. So when this drops, we will still be having a Hawks Film Lab coming out with me and Dan Viens, where we are going to be looking at Olu Oluwatimi and his game against the Cardinals when he stepped in. What did Olo do so well that had Mike Macdonald say it was a catalyst in his press conference for the run game? So we'll do a deep dive into that. I'll also have a episode coming out about the 8 irreplaceable Seahawks currently on this roster. My 1 through 8, why I have them ranked the way I do and their impact on this team, and why, two guys that are honor roll mentions didn't make the cut, and we'll dive into that. So that'll be coming out as well. And then I'll have my live preview show this week, as I always do, where I'll take your guys' questions, your comments, how you're feeling about going into this matchup with the Rams. And then on Sunday, I will do another, because it came in with high demand on the poll I put in about me doing instant reactions, 30 or 40-minute shows after games. So I will still do that. And then we will have a Seahawk aftermath following the game the next day, where me and Michael Thompson will be able to catch up, as we unfortunately weren't able to this week due to me being under the weather. But we'll be able to catch up, break down that Rams-Seahawks matchup in full detail for you guys, and have you guys join that. So all of that stuff will be coming up over this next week. So make sure you guys, again, you click like, you click subscribe, you click the notification button. And as always, everybody, stay loud, be proud, and go Hawks. Talk to you guys later.